You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin Cleric. I am flying solo today, and pardon the pun, because I am talking to a former American Air Force veteran, Adam DeRito, who is our American political correspondent. Adam, you're very welcome back to the Irish Political Roundup.
Well, it's always a pleasure to come on and talk to the people of Ireland and coming on your podcast and giving you guys a great insight what's going on in the US. So thanks for having me on.
It is our absolute delight to have you on and keeping it, because where else do we get this information? Because certainly not
Google.
from mainstream media.
Yeah, Google, which is also a problem, right? So yeah, no, it's good that we're connecting our countries through these political conversations because the US political system is very complicated to understand. And I think unless you have a good insight to somebody who actually is involved in US politics like I am, it's kind of hard to differentiate the truth from, the cannon fodder. So
And Adam, just to remind our viewers and listeners that you are also the author of the
yes, I
DeRito
am.
Act.
So I work with a lobbyist here in Washington, D.C., and I'm the author of the DeRito Act, which is basically a way for reforming our military to make sure that military officers, NCOs, or military members cannot retaliate against another member for reporting sexual assault, harassment, or misconduct by falsifying their mental health records, which ironically is not currently illegal in the U.S. military and has caused a lot of problems in the last several decades. And it's something that I'm fighting for to change for here in the U.S. government and the U.S. military. And I'm hopefully under the new leadership that we have here, I'm a lot more hopeful that this bill is going to get passed. But it's once again, it's a political game, but we're a lot more hopeful this year. So.
Literally, you mentioned Space Force, and I sent you a message to say, can you tell us about Space Force? I've
Yeah,
been I've been watching and listening for the last couple of years about Space Force, and I'm really intrigued to find out what is Space Force, who is it, and who controls it.
so the Space Force is kind of like the way the Navy is run here in the U.S. So the Navy, the Marine Corps is under the Department of the Navy, right? So it's a separate branch of the military, but it's a subset of the U.S. Navy. The Space Force is a subset of the United States Air Force. So it is technically the sixth and newest branch. It was commissioned in December 20th of 2019 under the National Defense Authorization Act for 2020 under President Trump. But one of the main reasons we needed to do is I always make fun of them. I call them nerds of the military because they are. There are a lot of super smart people in the Space Force that are just they don't like to PT, they don't like to go outside very much, but they love sitting behind their computers. Um, but we need people like that. Like it's a multi. So their core mission is to organize, train, and equip the space forces to protect the U.S. and allied interests in space and provide space capabilities to the joint force. So to everybody. So the for a long period of time, the Air Force controlled all the satellites and all the GPS and everything else, and it was like a separate mission for the Air Force. It required a certain amount of people. But now, with the expanding of AI, all these advanced rocket technologies and everything else, we need a force dedicated that just is responsible for that to make sure that the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps can focus on their core missions, which are very, very different. Because the Space Force, like their main objectives, so they do space domain awareness. So they monitor all the objects in orbit, which is a huge mission set. Like you have little
Wow.
tiny pieces of space junk that hit the International Space Station. That's a problem. If they hit our mission critical satellites, communication satellites, spy satellites, no, they have to adjust orbits, and that's a huge problem. So the Space Force is solely responsible for that now. Also, satellite operations, like I mentioned. So they run GPS, communications, reconnaissance. Everything that we do, even our discussions right now, depend on satellites for them to work. And if they don't, we can't stay globally connected. We can't conduct military operations. We can't conduct reconnaissance missions because we depend so heavily on space. Heck, I'm using Starlink right now as my internet. So without satellites and without the Space Force, keeping those satellites safe, you and I couldn't have this conversation. Another critical thing that I worked with overseas was missile defense warning systems, right? So there's a base, Buckley Space Force base here in Colorado. They are actually responsible as our mission critical missile defense warning systems. Even when I was in the Middle East, it was Buckley Space Force Base, Colorado, that was alerting us of launches from Iran, within Israel, Hamas, Yemen. They can see that stuff. That's how good our technology is. We can read your license plate from like 200,000 feet in the air, right? So and also protecting our space assets from adversarial threats. China and Russia want to be able to shoot down our satellites to blind us in communications. They want to be able to jam our communication systems. So the Space Force is responsible for offensive operations in space, which are obviously highly classified in how they do that, in order to make sure that their satellites don't interfere with ours or they don't have the ability to shoot down our satellites and mess with our communications. And obviously, with all that, it's supporting military operations through space-based capabilities. And space-based capabilities is a very broad, undefined thing because we do have most of our super secret squirrel stuff is in Space Force. Yeah, we have lots of cool airplanes, we have lots of cool bombs, and lots of cool other stuff. But the stuff that we have in space that nobody can actually touch is very, very classified for a reason. What we are able to do in space is absolutely incredible, and it's really great that we have somebody like Elon Musk who wants to put, people on Mars and stuff like that, but we wouldn't be able to do that without the Space Force, right? So it's a very interesting new branch, and it's underneath the Department of the Air Force, and even at the Air Force Academy now, you can graduate and commission into the Space Force, not necessarily the Air Force now. So it's a very capable force. I call them the nerds of the U.S. military, but we need nerds. If we don't have nerds, people like you and me aren't programming satellites, that's for sure. So.
Definitely not. My son says technology's wasted on me. Anyway, but when I grew up in Saudi Arabia, though, everybody used to bring me the video recorders. You had the VHI and you had the Betamax when we had a sandstorm, and I used to make a fortune cleaning out the video recorders with an earbud and nail polish remover. So I must have
Mhm.
had something when I was younger, an engineering mind when I was younger, but not now. But
Yeah.
so Space Force, so they were formed in 2019.
Yep.
So they're still, so this is 2025.
Yeah, they are the youngest and smallest branch. Before it was the Marine
Smallest
Corps
one.
was the smallest branch. They only have about 16 to 18,000 personnel in the U.S. Space Force. It's a very small branch. But like I said, their capabilities of what they do are astounding and incredible. And without the Space Force, our jets can't talk, our tanks can't talk, our missiles can't hit on target. They are responsible for all of that advanced technology, and it's very impressive what they can do. So.
And that's why it's so important that Elon Musk is working with the Trump administration, because he has that technology to help with military technology in space, especially with Space Force.
Oh yeah, I mean, he also has the ability to put these satellites into space better than Boeing or United Launch Alliance with Northrop Grumman can even do. You know what I mean? And Lockheed Martin. I mean, he has made it more cost effective to go into space. He has proven that with his rockets that can land themselves, which is an absolutely incredible thing to watch. If anyone who hasn't watched Elon Musk land a booster and catch it onto a tower, NASA couldn't do that. Yeah, so it's a really good argument for that. Very smart civilians can save the taxpayers billions of dollars by not allowing government agencies to just waste billions and trillions of dollars because they can at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer. Elon Musk is going to make space travel more cost effective, increase our rapid response capabilities, and that's why he is an advisor within the Trump administration, because he just thinks outside the box. And I think in order for us to change our government and everything moving forward, we need people like that involved in our government. So.
It's really interesting because people always go, "Oh, what's Elon Musk doing with the Trump administration?" That gives the example of why. And I'm just thinking, Adam, there must be a lot of military people out there watching this and going, "My God, this conversation is wasted on Roisin Leclerc because she hasn't got a clue what she's talking about." But but
Neither
that
do
is
I. I'm not that smart. I just,
but this is what we want to get out there to the people, is the why, the what, the who, what, why, and where. And because this is important, this is what people are not talking about in the mainstream media. They're just
correct.
talking about sensationalism and column inches and headlines and distractions. They're not talking about what's really going on behind the scenes and in front of the scenes.
Exactly. And it's important to, like I said, even before we got on this podcast, we kind of talked about it. And no offense, but there's a lot of dumb people in the world that only respond to about 10 words or less,
Yeah.
right? But you got to understand, do you want to be responsible for controlling the government and launching people into space? No, I wouldn't. Neither would you. We have very smart, capable people, and I think people just need to trust the process. And because, just like we discussed with the JFK files, we have been lied to for so many decades and so long, and believe that this is the best way government can operate, that people actually believe that. And it's not. Name one major corporation, whether it's Microsoft or Apple, who would ever operate their companies the way the US government or any government, even in Ireland, would operate, right? It's completely inefficient. It's a waste of money, and no good Fortune 500 company would ever allow their companies to operate the way our governments do. And it's really good to bring that business mindset over to government to not only take better care of its people, but take care of the money and the taxpayer dollars and make sure that we are the safest, most integrated countries that we can be, and that we're actually making a difference versus causing more problems, which the CIA has done for several decades now. So.